Hello, hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, good to see you. Welcome back for those who are joining us online. It's lovely to have you there. Thank you for making us part of your afternoon, and thank you for coming so promptly back into the room. Such a lot that we have got through already today. Now, I asked for your help a little bit earlier, and I asked you all to tweet or to use X for me. And I said I wanted to get our hashtag trending, EU Agri-food Days. And guess what? You did. I know, absolutely fabulous. We were trending number 4 in Brussels over lunch break, so well done, but I've been told we now need to get to number 3. So, any thoughts that you have, any photographs or anything like that, we would really like you to put them on social media because it increases the conversation. It brings more people into the conversation. And also, you know, if you're at home, why not tweet a picture of where you are sitting watching us? It would be lovely to see that as well. The hashtag EU Agri-food Days. And while you're tweeting and sharing your views online, please also do share your views in the room. Use Slido to ask any questions. I had a couple of conversations over lunch with people who said, you've not asked our questions yet. We want to talk about trade deals, or we want to talk about dairy or meat production. There is, just so you know, a dedicated trade and policy session tomorrow afternoon. And I know that that will be, you know, really, really popular with a lot of people wanting to get involved in that. So keep your questions coming because we can put them towards the right panels as well, where they can be talked about in a lot of depth. So thank you. We're going to carry on with one of the big themes that's come out so far this morning in so many ways, and that's getting a fair deal for farmers. We've already heard from so many farmers here on this stage. It's time now to talk about getting that fair deal. Delighted to introduce your moderator for this afternoon. Please welcome Anna Gumbau.
Well, thank you very much, Sasha, for this kind introduction, and welcome everybody to this session. I think a session that was expected and anticipated by many of you on the topic of a fair remuneration for farmers from the market. Let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Anna Gumbau. I've been a climate and energy journalist here in Brussels for the past 5 years. Not so much into the agri-food sector, although honestly I'm learning so much and it looks like such an exciting field that you might be seeing my face more often in this kind of events. And we have, I think, a very exciting session ahead of us. As the topics, the title of the event says it, and the session says it itself, fair remuneration has been one of the key demands from farmers in the recent protests and we've seen in the past months. And in the past couple of years, we've been seeing a lot of rising challenges for our farmers across Europe, from rising food production costs, an energy price crisis, a war in our doorstep, geopolitical tensions across the globe, and also, let's not forget that across Europe we're already seeing the long-term impacts of climate change. So there's a lot to be talking about today. We also saw this morning how President Ursula von der Leyen announced 2 proposals that are expected to tackle precisely that, the fair remuneration of our farmers. So we have a few intense discussions ahead of us. We're going to be starting with a keynote presentation that will set the scene on the topic that we are going to be talking about today, followed by 2 panel discussions. So the first one will be looking a bit into how, up until now, we've been tackling and coping with the challenges that we've been seeing across Europe. And then the second panel discussion will dive deep into the ways forward. Let's say, what can we do about it? Which strategies, which measures, which tools we need to navigate such an increasingly complex landscape. This session is intense not only because of the amount of topics that we have to discuss and how timely they are, but also because of the timing. Between these 2 sessions, there will be no coffee break as such. However, the coffee station outside of the hall will be available for those of you who want to take a quick coffee and then come back. Just as a reminder, you cannot bring your coffee here into the room. So if you really feel the urge to get some coffee, to get some water, have a quick sip over there and then come back, because we have some really exciting discussions ahead and you don't want to miss out on them. So then also to remember that you will have interpretation available in 23 languages, so get your devices ready and indeed continue using the hashtag EU Agri-food Days. Keep sharing your impressions of this event and let's continue making it trending then. So without further ado, let's start with our first speaker, who indeed will help us set the scene for such an important discussion ahead. I'm delighted to be welcoming the research director at the Toulouse School of Economics, Céline Bonnet. Welcome.
Good afternoon to everyone. I'm waiting for my slides. It works, perfect. So first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is a pleasure to be here. And I'm talking about the implication along the food chain of a better remuneration for farmers. So just a few words about the outline of the talk. I will provide a background of the farmer income. I will mainly talk about the implication of a better remuneration for farmers, and I will provide two topics. The first one is on the price transmission along the food chain of an increase in the farm income, but also a second topic on the potential food increase and potential consequences for food consumption for EU households. And finally, I will conclude with some challenges. So just some very quick background. So what you can see on the left is that we have a very large heterogeneity of the farm income across the EU countries. So when it is light, this is quite a small farm income, whereas when it is black, this is really better. On the right-hand side, you can see that we also have a large heterogeneity in the farm income across the type of farming, and this heterogeneity could also vary across the different countries. So you see that the blue bar represents the average in Europe, and you have some examples of different countries where the different type of farmings have different incomes. We could say that we have an income inequalities with respect to other work activity. So if you look at the graph, the figure on the left, you can see that today, I don't read very well the screen. So on the 2018, we reach the income farm reaches only 50% of the average wage for other work activities. So we have some inequality with respect to the other work sectors. We also have some inequalities within the agricultural sectors because we have a high volatility of farm income. We have also a strong correlation with the farm size. We already discussed about that this morning. And for example, 20% of the workforce generates 78% of the farm family income. This is quite large. So given this picture, we need to have a better farm income for more equalities. But this better remuneration will have some effects along the food chain. So how will this increased remuneration be transmitted along the food chain? This is a complex question. And what could be the impact on consumer prices and on food inequalities. So the first topic, so if we expect an increase in the farmer remuneration, we expect to have higher raw agricultural commodity prices, and this will increase the production cost of the industry. We expect then to have higher wholesale prices, and then we will increase the distribution cost for retailers. And then we will have an increase in the food prices and the food expenditures for European consumers. No? Yes. But the price transmission is very complex and it depends on a lot of factors. It depends on the food sectors. It depends on the structure of the sector, how many levels you have on this sector, and what are the concentration levels at each level. What you can see on the right-hand side is we have an heterogeneous number of actors along the food chain. That means that the market power are not the same along the food chain and at each level, but we also have heterogeneous actors at each level. For example, at the retail level, we have a number of actors which is quite big, but we know that for hypermarkets and supermarkets, we have some very powerful retailers in most of countries in Europe. We also have the price transmission also depends on the EU country because it depends on the regulation that you have at the country level, but also on the concentration of the retailing industry for each country. It also depends on the initial value sharing along the food chain. So on the right, you can see some example about how the value is shared between the raw commodity price, the gross margin of the industry, and the gross margin of the retailers. Those data are provided by the France Agrimaire 2021, and you have this value sharing for different generic products. And you can see that the value sharing is very heterogeneous across the different type of products. So this means that we have an heterogeneous ability to absorb the increase of a better raw material prices. The price transmission along the food chain, there are some scientific evidence about the mechanisms that change this price transmission. So first of all, the demand curvature affects the price transmission. Behind the price elasticity and the super elasticity, it is how much the demand varies when the price increases and how much this variation varies when the price increases. So the way the consumer reacts to a price increase affects the price transmission along the food chain. The bargaining power in the vertical structure is very important. We know that we have some asymmetric market bargaining power along the food chain between farmers, the industry, but also between the industry and the retailers, because we have very big firms and very small firms at each stage, particularly for the industry and the retailers. The price transmission also depends on the horizontal competition. That is, the market power of each firm in the food sector, its size also. It also depends on the level of product differentiation, meaning that in the food sector, you could have some conventional products and you could have some qualitative products with some labels. And this changes the way the value is shared along the food chain and the way some cost increase is transmitted along the food chain. The magnitude of the cost increase will also affect the way the cost is transmitted along the food chain. Another important question we have to we have to keep in mind is the final consequences for consumer prices, for food products, and the potential effect for food consumption. So just few words about the context. So you have on the right the price increase, the global price increase. We had the 20 last years. We had an increase of plus 75%. And this global price increase is due to a regular price increase, but it is also due to some shocks. And we could find on this period the 2008 Great Recession with the financial crisis that leads to a price increase for consumers. We can also note the COVID-19 pandemic with the disruption in the global supply chain, and also the Ukraine war that increased the food prices. Those increase in price will have some consequences about food consumption, and what we know is that low-income countries and low-income households are more sensitive to change in prices. So they will be more affected by an increase in price. So the modest household will be more affected by an increase in the farmer income. But what we also know is that consumers can adapt their behavior. They smooth and they adjust their consumption in different ways. They spend more time shopping and finding lower prices when they face large shocks. They also increase their use of discount or coupons, and they also switch to generic products or to low price retailers with some potential consequences on the food quality. So what I wanted to provide you here is just a descriptive analysis of what could happen for food consumption when we increase the prices. So this is a French case studies where I use some data from 2002 to 2019, and I will analyze the effect of a price increase on food quantities, on food expenditures, but also on food quality. And I measure the food quality with the nutrient profile model, which is a score that was developed by the Food Standard Agency in UK. So this food quality measure takes into account 4 unhealthy nutrients: energy, saturated fat, sugar, and sodium, and 3 healthy nutrients, that is the percentage of fruit and vegetables, proteins, and fiber. Just a few words about the context of the food consumption in France. We can observe some nutritional inequalities in terms of food quality of different income level households. So in this graph, you have, it is represented the NPM, which is the food quality score. And you see that for modest households, we have a higher NPM score than for rich households. That means that the food quality is better for rich households than for modest households. So this is what we observe. So the increase in price could increase those inequalities. And this is what we show on this graph. So the price increase have an effect on food expenditures. So you see that you have, on the left, you have the effect for poor household in France. In the middle, you have middle income, the effect for middle income households. And on the right, you have what happened for rich French households. So we see that the food expenditures are less affected for poor households, And this is because they decrease more their quantities. So you can see that in green, you have the decrease in quantity, and the decrease in quantity for poor households is higher than for rich households. But we also have an interesting effect. It is on the food quality, the blue bar. And the blue bar increases more for poor households, meaning that the NPM score increases more for poor households than for rich households, meaning that the food quality is deteriorated when they face price increase. Meaning that what we observe here will be the difference between poor and rich households regarding the quality of their food consumption will increase when we will face an increase in food prices. So I talk about the potential effect on food consumption and on food inequalities, but we could also have some good news because some consumers are willing to pay for a better farmer remuneration. What you have on the right-hand side is the evolution of this proportion of consumers that are willing to pay for a better remuneration of farmers for a label. So this is increasing over time, and we can see some initiatives. Sorry, this is some example in France about labels that guarantee fair trade for consumers. We could find some store brands that guarantee this better remuneration. We could have some label which is based on consumer votes, and we could also have a brand that is owned by over 350 dairy farmers through France. For conclusion, we face a lot of challenges as you can see on my presentation, but as you can see since this morning, the question is the fair profit sharing along the food chain, and this is a very complex question and topic because this is really heterogeneous across the sectors, across the countries, and across the actors within a country and a sector. We have some trade-off between a better remuneration for farmers and the food and nutrition inequalities. We have to take care about the consequences of a global increase in prices. One challenge which is really important, and we talk about that since this morning, we need a better remuneration for farmers because we need some investment for more sustainable food production. And we cannot have investments without any remuneration. And this, I just want to conclude saying that this is a very complex topic due to the variability that we can observe across countries, across sectors, across the actors, and we need to analyze what could happen sector by sector and countries per country because this is very specific and we have a very different effects regarding the level of income for farmers, but also the food inequalities for consumers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much, Céline Bonnet, for setting the scene so nicely. I think it's been a very insightful presentation. We've been looking at the challenges, at the complexities, and luckily with us we have a great panel of experts ahead to unpack these topics a bit more detail. So if I can invite you to take a seat again, thank you so much for having been with us. And with the challenges that Céline just outlined, as I just mentioned, we're going to have two mini panel discussions, if we can call it like that. The first one looking into how the actors across the food chain have have coped with such challenges. And then the second one will be looking in more detail into the ways forward. So I'll be inviting the panelists of this first session to join me on stage. I'll be calling you one by one, so please join me in giving a big round of applause to each one of them. The first one that I'll be introducing on stage is an arable crop farmer and the president of the cereal working group of Copa Cogeca, Cédric Benoist. Welcome. Cédric, you can join me over here. Also with us is the general manager at Mila Bergmilch Südtirol, a dairy farmer from Südtirol in Italy, Joachim Reinhalter. Welcome. Just over here. Joining us as well is the managing director at the Federation of Hungarian Food Industries, Attila Vörös. Welcome. Just here in the middle, Attila. Also with us, we have the Group Director for Public Affairs at the REWE Group, Émilie Bourgoin. Welcome. Just over here, Émilie. Joining us as well is the Director General for Competition at the Austrian Competition Authority and recently elected Chair of the OECD Working Party on Competition and Regulation, Nathalie Harzorf. Welcome. So Nathalie over here. And last but definitely not the least, we have the senior economist at the Belgian Federal Public Service Economy, Mirle Claessens. Welcome. All right, so welcome everybody. Make yourselves comfortable. We have just about 40 to 45 minutes of discussion ahead of us to unpack some of the challenges that Céline, I think, outlined very interestingly. I would like maybe to start with you, Cédric, if you can talk to us a little bit about how you as a farmer have been coping with the many, many challenges that you must have faced in the past 2 years. What can you tell us about that?
Merci. Bonjour à tous.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having invited us to speak today. I think together with the colleagues from this morning, we do have a lot in common. We're all passionate about what we do. We've made a passion our jobs, and that's already a big plus. And I think on this panel, we represent each one piece of the puzzle across Europe. And this whole puzzle comes together to create agriculture with a capital A, which is the very foundation of food security in Europe. So that's what I wanted to say by way of introduction. As an arable crop farmer, I face a lot of challenges. Many of them were already outlined this morning: climate change, a lack of solutions to these problems. I don't want to repeat what's been said already. But when we look at the food chain, as an arable crop farmer, it's not us who decide the price. There are reference prices in the market, be they international or not. For example, wheat is decided on the short-term markets, and that's a reference price that is set, and that applies to us because we are part of the commodities market. And that market sometimes allows us to have a little bit of profit. In my cooperative, we sometimes have bonuses, so extra on top of the basic wheat price. But it remains the base. And if it goes down, I might have a little on top of that, but the total will be affected by that changing price and the fluctuation. So that's one point. Secondly, there are also external factors that can influence the price. So my colleagues from the east of Europe, for example, have experienced problems with grain imported from Ukraine, and that's directly linked to EU policy, the fact that we have an influx of Ukrainian grain, which led to negative prices and a negative price impact, which was maybe 20 or 30 euros cheaper than the average French price. So there's an impact that can come from geopolitics, developments, from economic decisions, or even the Trump election, which meant that the euro dropped, the value of the dollar dropped rather, and that affected our prices too. And so there are many external factors. I'm also a sugar beet producer, and we're affected by imports due to Mercosur. No one mentioned Mercosur this morning, but I mean, as an arable crop farmer, I felt it was my duty. Okay, maybe it was mentioned twice now, because it does affect us. That's reality. And then there's not just the price of our grains, but then there's developments over time, fluctuations. Price goes up and down over 1 year. If, for example, Putin decides to invade Ukraine, that can lead to a steep rise in prices. If there's fluctuations on the export market. Now, when I was younger, I used to imagine that I would be a really linked to fluctuations on the market. Maybe playing them might be a fun game, but really that's not realistic. And it's my cooperative's job, and I'm glad that I am part of a cooperative, to give an average price across the seasons, which says that we won't necessarily see the highest price, but we'll avoid the lowest price. And that's a more precautious approach that allows us to work within the market. And that is somewhere that we really see the cooperative play their role. And you did mention that there's an increase in input prices, in prices of equipment. Agricultural equipment prices have gone up 30%. That's a phenomenal increase, and it's gone up even 100% over a longer period. And so I have to make decisions as a farmer. Am I going to buy new equipment? Am I going to share it with a neighbour to try and split the costs? All of these are difficult decisions that we have to take to really try and manage the costs, because we have to reduce our prices, keep things competitive. And then, as you said, with inputs and fertilizer, there's also the cost of energy to take into account. So market observatories within DG Agri, we work with them. We talk about anti-dumping duties, for example. There's other policies like CBAM that will affect us. Our colleagues might speak about that. The CBAM may affect the cost of fertilizer, but who is going to pay that tax? Everyone's against climate change. We agree. We're the first victims. Everyone's against global warming, but will it really be greener, our future? And how can we do that without everything becoming more expensive? We had a lovely presentation that was looking at how there are families that are struggling to even buy food. This is a really important topic. So to conclude, any farmers like me, a family farm, I took it over from my father, who had it from his father. Any productivity gains that we make have been robbed from us by the market for 40 years. And so small farms like myself, my grandfather managed to raise 4 children. My mother was a single mother. My wife works alongside me in order to make sure that we're just trying to make ends meet due to the losses that we've suffered.
Your first reflections. I mean, we already saw from Celine's presentation that the costs have increased in a very steep manner, and you, on a daily basis in your work, are exposed to so many factors that are beyond your control. Now, I wanted to hear the reflections from Joachim, also as a dairy farmer. Go ahead.
Welcome. I bring my vision of a mountain dairy farmer from northern Italy. For 2 long and punishing years, we have endured a relentless surge in production costs. 2 years in which every farmer, every cooperative, and every honest hand working in the fields and cowsheds of every mountain region has struggled to stay afloat amidst unforgiving market pressures. And what will it take to ensure the survival of the mountain agriculture? An agriculture that is not a luxury, not a sentimental relic, but a fundamental pillar of rural development and regional identity. Let's name the facts without sugarcoating. Mountain farming is the anchor that stabilizes our high-altitude environment. It protects landscapes against erosions and avalanches, nurtures biodiversity of alpine grasslands, and secures water supplies for countless downstream communities. Yet those who practice it, especially in the mountains of South Tyrol and northern Italy, are increasingly part-time farmers, more than 70% of all farms. In fact, this is not by choice, it is forced reality of low returns and back-breaking requirements that leave no room to earn a living solely from the land. As the older generation steps down, their descendants ask themselves if it's worth continuing or it makes more sense to simply give up. We all know what the answer might be. If nothing changes, painful exodus from the production that leaves the mountains neglected. We must acknowledge the broken dynamics within the food chain. Over the past 2 years, every participant of our sector, farmers, dairies, cooperatives, has absorbed astronomical cost increase. Retailers refused to pass these on the customers, leaving producers to carry a crushing weight. Only when the products started disappearing from the shelves did trade partners relent and allow prices to reach bare minimum survival level. By then, we had already lost 10% of our members and 10% of our milk volume. Those losses are permanent. Those wounds will not simply heal. This is the situation in the Alps, in South Tyrol. And as said before, global trade links flood the market with products from regions with lower standards and with lower prices. In these past years, farmers have poured immense resources into measures for animal welfare, environmental protection, and compliance with all manner of regulations. But still, we have not long-term planning security where we will go. Take the conversion from the tether to the loose house stables, a costly shift demanded by the legislation that offers no realistic support or transition path. For small, high-altitude farm, where every kilo of milk is already far more expensive to produce, these requirements translate into crushing debt and suffocating uncertainty. The market does not compensate for the higher costs, and so generation after generation becomes mired in escalating obligations, drained and burdened by psychological strain. Mm-hmm. And let's not pretend all regulations are applied fairly. Small alpine farms face the same demanding standards as large-scale enterprises in the lowland. And we have still the looming threat of predators, wolves and bears in the Alps now, that encroaching on pastures where livestock have traditionally grazed in summer. High-altitude grazing, vital for maintaining our sensitive alpine landscapes, is under attack. What future can we promise young farmers when even this time-honored practice is imperiled? The generation that once moved these meadows for a God's reward is simply to keep the landscape thriving is slowly disappearing. We need decisive action, policy that reflect reality, market arrangements that guarantee fair compensation, and recognition that protecting our mountain agriculture, that protects the entire ecosystem. This will be the big challenge in the future of mountain agriculture.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Thank you very much for sharing these reflections with us. As you said in your introduction, no sugarcoating on it. You really reflected on the situation the way it is, and very important also, I think, the fact that you also brought the perspective of mental health and the burden that this challenge poses to farmers' own mental health. So thank you very much. Now I'd like to hear some first reflections from Attila Vörös, representing the Hungarian food industries.
Thank you. Yes, coming from an association representing Hungarian food manufacturers, as a basic point, I would like to highlight that food industry or food manufacturing sector is very diverse. Just to give you an example, we have, statistically speaking, we have 33 subsectors of food manufacturing. That means this is a very diverse industry. This is also a very variable industry. We have companies of all sizes, like very micro and small companies to a few big ones. In Hungary, it's like if we have some sort of 4,000 food manufacturing companies, of which 80% is micro or a small company. So this means we are a very diverse group. We do a lot of products, we do a lot of different things, which is put together as a mass, but it's a very diverse mass. And coming back to our topic today, this inflation years, so to say, I think since 2020, we haven't had a normal day of business. So first we had COVID, then we had these huge price increases, and then on top in 2022, the Ukrainian war just broke out in our neighborhood. So for 4 years now, we are never operating as business as usual. To have some sort of, so to say, find some positives into that, during COVID, we realized that we can work together as a chain. And it's almost, sorry to say, it's almost a miracle that and really it's just putting out common places. So from the ground until our tables, it's so many actors involved, so complex and diverse processes. And each and everybody is doing their part, either with hard work or with dedication or both. So what we learned is that this is really a resilient system. It's not even a chain, it's a whole system. And during COVID, we realized that manufacturing also has its issues. Stakeholders realized that it's not just food that we put into a black box and a packaged good comes out of the other end. It's that we need a lot of other things, inputs like fuel, gas, electricity, packagings. So altogether, during these 2 years we are talking about now, 21 and 22, we had huge increases in these costs. And the most important thing, especially today in this company, is that our raw materials, so the basic output of agricultural production, all prices increased, I would say skyrocketed within a few months. And we had to deal with this. And the other positive outtake from this is that actually the whole chain could go along with it. So our manufacturers could accept the higher costs and the higher prices from farmers and from agricultural producers. So this means we could take up the costs. Unfortunately, we had to carry on through the retailers and through our shelves. So this is what we saw at each and every one of us at the end of the day in the supermarkets or shops, that we had, in Hungary, we had a 25% inflation at top against the 10% average EU level. But behind those numbers, we had like a 150% increase in agricultural production prices, 150. And then from manufacturing prices, we saw a rise of 135%. So most of it we could translate into our prices, but not all. And then the retail also could do something. And this was such a process that was going along until the point where consumers, so us at the end of the day, had no more money to spend in the shops. And this was happened in Hungary in 2023, that people just didn't have more money to spend. So basically the whole process got to a halt of increase of price. And now we are looking, but that's also for another panel, to look to the future and see how we can deal with those things that also have an effect on prices. Like for us, manufacturers, it's efficiency, it's operational costs, that we started to work on that one to compensate everything and to be able to pay the farmers the prices for their produces.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Attila Boros. I keep some important figures that you mentioned. No, the 25% inflation in Hungary on food, on the sales of food, but then the 150% in production cost increase, if I got it correctly.
For agricultural products.
Yeah, agricultural products, indeed. Thanks a lot. And now, since you mentioned already your introduction to retailers, it's now time to give the floor to Émilie Bourgoin for some first reflections as well.
Merci beaucoup. Donc
Thank you. I'll be speaking in French, but I represent a German group. It's a cooperative group, and we have a presence in around 10 countries in Europe, and we've around 15,000 stores throughout Europe. Now, so I think I am the first representative of distribution to speak today. But I think what I have to say will complement what we've already heard to a great degree. Now, I think what was important to note is that we all have a common motivation to find common solutions. I think that we can only find these solutions together when grasping these challenges. We've challenges around sustainable development, animal welfare, climate challenges, and what we're seeing is that we need to bridge that big gap when it comes to the internal market, which we need, so that we have products from everywhere in our supermarkets, and then regional and national considerations. Those are issues pertaining to profile. For us as a regional cooperative, it's very much in our DNA. Now, we haven't heard yet from consumer groups. We also represent consumer groups, and they're a very important link in the chain. And we need to look at consumers' behavior. They're affected by the issues that we're facing around sustainable development, and the question arises what consumers are ready to pay. So when you do a survey, when someone goes into a supermarket, asking whether they want more sustainable development, of course, the vast majority will say yes. But if you do it after they've looked at their receipts at the end of their shop, then the answers might be different. So we as distributors have this function to raise awareness for consumers around these issues, to let them know that they have these choices, and so that they can choose wisely about what products they want to buy. Now, this has already been mentioned, but we need to say that since COVID, Ukraine, inflation, these crises are the new normal. We need to look at how we have acted as a REVA group. We've invested more than 350 million to absorb costs, and we've done that because our turnover was more normal. It was more significant during COVID than that which we invested to absorb inflation. And that's because we had consumers who couldn't absorb these costs. We, of course, engaged in deep-rooted analysis around our prices, and we got to around 6 or 7% inflation in our shops. The national average in Germany was rather at around 12%. I'd like to go into the agricultural policy topics now a little bit, as Cedric's touched on already. We've more than 33,000 direct links with farmers in our German group. That's to say, we work in direct contact with these farmers, and with them, we try to craft new ideas. And that has pushed us to create our agricultural competition centre where we address such issues. We focus here on contracts, redistribution of value as well, and other issues. So we look at issues that are very important to every link in the chain, including us. There was a study recently, and we had the first tripartite contract published in Germany recently. It laid out prices, indicators, multi-year contracts. So we had numerous parameters involved in the contract. What's important for me to emphasize now is that there's not just one type of farmer, one client, one distributor. That means there won't just be one solution that can apply to everyone. There won't be a law that can govern everything with regard to these issues. And we can't manage all the problems faced by our branches. So what's incumbent upon us then is to have contracts in place that are fair and to do contracts that are transparent and allow for more open communication with the consumers. As for legislators, well, the level playing field is what we expect from them. In Germany, we've many examples of this in our different sectors. So there are very significant, important movements in that area. Everyone sits down around the same table and negotiates commitments. So there's those three instruments, and the mixture of those three instruments is what we need to continue. Thank you.
I'm noting perhaps three key messages and potential points for discussion. The first of all being that indeed we have a common motivation and a common objective to achieve the same goals. So let's discuss this into detail later. Also the important role of retailers, but also the role of consumers. And in our second panel, we're going to have the Director General of the European Consumer Organization, and I think he already noted down some comments. And then the third one, the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all, precisely because of the heterogeneity of the sector. Now let's move to Nathalie. If you could talk to us a little bit about what's the role of competition authorities in supporting and helping tackle such challenges.
Yeah, thank you. As you already pointed out, I'm speaking with different hats today. The Austrian Competition Authority is also the enforcer against unfair trading practices. So that's one hat. Then I'm also the head of the Competition Authority. That's another hat. With the recent international role, I'm also looking at it from the general perspective of OECD countries. About a year ago, we had the situation in Austria that my authority was receiving every day hundreds of emails by consumers about energy prices, also about food pricing, right? So that was an area of major concern, and a huge public debate started, a sort of like also blame discussion, I have to say. So we received different calls for action saying, oh, it's the farmers that are increasing the prices. No, it's the producers, big producers. No, it's the supermarket chains that are increasing their margins. And so it was a very, I think, emotional debate as well. And I think here it can be the role for a competition agency, also UTP enforcement agency as ours, that we act in a way with the same distance to all groups and stakeholders, but we also work really closely with markets, and we are able to get the real data from all the companies. They have to cooperate with us. So that's what we did. We asked data from 1,500 producers. We got very sensitive data from 800 retailers. We asked the consumers. And I would like to share some of our results with you that informed public policy making. Because in such a situation where you get so much enraged response from citizens, there's a temptation also to introduce quick fix regulation. But we have to be careful what we do and how we influence markets on the long term, right? So one result was that actually following the war in Ukraine, we could not, from the data, we saw that there was no general increase in margins by supermarkets. Also with food producers, we could see that maybe with some segments, there was a slight increase, but there was no general trend in increasing their margins. So there was one, I think, myth that we managed to to respond to, and I think it's important to put the facts on the table. It doesn't mean we didn't see competition problems or issues, maybe some other results. We also asked producers how much they are facing unfair trading practices. 4 out of 10 respondents said they had faced black clause action by retailers. So that was very concerning for me with the head of a UTP enforcement agency, because it also showed it doesn't match the complaints we get. So what does it mean? It means there's a big angst factor, so there's a fear factor in going to the enforcer and actually talking to us and revealing what's going on, because in this sector inquiry they revealed this, but they were not approaching us as a complainant. Another thing we found, in Austria there has been a lot of debate, why are prices in supermarkets cheaper in Germany than in Austria? And it is a fact that in some segments there are differences of 10 to 15%, right? And there we also got data, and we saw that there are different pricing strategies by also big international corporations. They may give different prices to maybe the same retail chain for Austria and Germany. So that's also an interesting fact, I think, regarding what's going on in our single market, right? And then we also talked to consumers, and we asked consumers, what's important for you? What do you want? What do you wish? And one thing that was remarkable, that was not what we expected, is consumers put quality on a higher stance than pricing, actually. So quality was a bit more important to them than prices. We didn't expect that. Maybe an interesting result for you as well. And the main concern by consumer was that the consumer felt they didn't have transparency where they would get the best value for their money. So they asked us that they would like to see more easier price comparison for their grocery buying, weekly groceries buying, shopping. And 25% even said they would be willing to pay for better price comparison websites or tools or something interesting, right? Since quality is also so important for the consumers, I think it would have to encompass also quality. So maybe this is something that competition authorities can do. They can inform public policy making. I think another thing is, of course, enforcement, core enforcement. We have cases pending before the courts. The first case pending before the ECJ comes from Austria regarding UTP practices. And also where we see abuse of a dominant position, I think competition authorities need to take action and enforce. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And now let's move to the perspective of Belgium with Mirle. I'm wondering how this impact on prices has been happening in Belgium, and what have you observed in this regard? What can you tell me about that?
So at the Belgian Ministry of Economics, we have the Belgian Price Observatory. Mm-hmm. There we monitor consumer prices for food products closely for already several years. And to understand the evolution of these prices, we also monitor commodity prices. So in August 2021, we saw a significant increase in the consumer prices, as mentioned before, due to the increase in commodity prices and energy prices. So with this high inflation, also in Belgium, questions rose about the price transmission and the margins within the different sectors. So to improve the transparency in the food supply chain, we decided to make an analysis of the price transmission in the food supply chain as well as the margins. So this study showed that an increase in commodity prices was passed on to industrial prices as well as to consumer prices. However, with a delay and to a lesser extent. On the other hand, when the commodity prices started to decrease, we didn't see a decrease in industrial prices or retail prices. However, these prices tend to stabilize at a higher level. So this was a confirmation of the asymmetrical price transmission that we already observed in previous studies. So besides the price transmission, we also looked at the margins in the different sectors of the food supply chain. And in 2022, we saw that the net income for the primary sector increased after 2 bad years. However, there's big differences between the different subsectors. On the other hand, in that same year, the margins within the food industry, as well as in the retail sector, they didn't increase. So this means that these sectors absorbed partially the increase in the costs of the commodity prices. So this data, this accounting data is only available with a delay. Therefore, at the Belgian Price Observatory, we created a theoretical model to assess the margins in more recent periods, so only with a 2-month delay. And based on this model, we saw that in 2023, the net income of the farmers continued to improve. And also there was an improvement in the margins for the food industry in 2023 compared to 2022. So this showed that this is due to the decreased commodity prices combined with the stabilized producer prices. Now, our model is less suited for the retail sector due to the unavailability of detailed company data. So to bring this transparency within the food supply chain, it is important for the Belgian Price Observatory to have accurate and timely data for all sectors to bring this transparency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Merle, for this first introduction and bringing also the Belgian, the national perspective into it. I've noted down plenty of potential follow-up questions and matters I'd like to ask you about, but maybe I would like to bring first the opportunity to react to each other's statements, if there is anything in particular that you would want to point out and to react on. Do you have anyone? All right, then I'll launch my first one of follow-up questions then, and maybe I would like to stay with you, Mirle, because I know that the Belgian public services economy took action when the farmers' protests erupted, and I would like to hear from you which actions you took you put in place, and what have you observed since?
Okay, so indeed, in the beginning of the year, there were the farmers' protests in Brussels. So as a response to these protests, the Belgian ministers, together with the Federal Public Service of Economy, created a food task force, bringing together all partners within the food supply chain, as well as regional and federal authorities. So there were different working groups created, one of which dealt with regulation of the UTP. And one of the outcomes was a ban on a sell with a loss for the primary sector, except in specific cases. This is new, because in Belgium, also selling at a loss was already banned for other sectors. Now, another working group works on transparency. We are creating indicators for all the different branches within the agricultural sector to measure the profitability of the agricultural sector and the evolution of it. Now here it's still a work in progress to bring more transparency to the food supply chain, as well to the agricultural sector in specific.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mirle. I believe Natalie wanted to react.
Yeah, maybe just sharing maybe a best practice from Austria, because you were also touching about the farmers' protests. So Austria early on established a mediation body in the Ministry of Agriculture, and separate from that, we're the enforcement body, and we get quite positive response by farmers on separating mediation from enforcement, and at the same time we cooperate really well with the mediation body, and sometimes they pass on complaints if there's no resolution. But I think this setting up this system, and I think if I understand the Commission's proposal from today, it will be obligatory to have like a mediation body, and I think it's a best practice that has worked very well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't know if Emily, I felt you were ready to react, or otherwise.
Enfin, je ne sais pas, je peux donner aussi.
I'm not sure. Maybe I can give you an overview of how we see things in Germany, because we have an assessment that's just finished. So there were some good practices as well. We had this assessment that took place 2 years after the European directive. And it's true, we had workshops with the Ministry of Agriculture on production costs, transparency, the supply chain, best practices. We also had round table discussions with associations. We talked about the issues of provenance, standards, best practices that need to be implemented. And as for companies, it's true, we work together with the ministry. We want to have a case study, but so far things seem to have been quite positive, and we are working well together in the sector.
Going into this direction, maybe I can stay with you, Attila. If you could also talk to us about, we've been consistently hearing that this uncertain, complex landscape is here to stay. So I'm wondering, from the perspective of food industries, how are you adapting to it? What are perhaps some strategies that you can put in place, or that you can share with us, though?
Well, that's a tough one. It's tricky because first you would try to, let's say, stick to farmers and like suppliers to us with raw materials. Mm-hmm. You would firstly think to have long-term contracts, which you can depend on. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, it turned out, like just 2 years ago, that should you have a long-term contract, even from that, either party might want to just modify their position or leave that contract if things get so if such surprises happen. So what we are still learning, but one of the great conclusions of COVID and then this price surge is that we have to be able to react quickly to whatever new things happen. The best example was the Ukraine war for us. Like for several weeks or months, there was a question if grains and other raw products would come from Ukraine. There was a total shift of supply chains, and then when those ingredients, for us it's ingredients, sorry, those came to Hungary, they just turned upside down the whole market and the usual things of doing business for, let's say, if we stick to wheat or corn, for the mills, and then for other companies doing all sorts of bakeries and such. So what we learned is that there is a need to develop this competency within each and every company or food processor to be able to react quickly. And there's just one thing which is very important, I think, to say. I already said it, but to have that in mind, that we are mostly micro and small enterprises, where there isn't a lot of people to do all sorts of things. I have a few members. One people is doing quality product development and I think whatever in the facility as well. So it's like you have to be very, very mindful of how you use your people. Plus you have to teach them new skills. So I think it's really a challenge for us. Still we are learning.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you were saying before how no days business as usual lately, with the many crises that we've been seeing in front of us. Now I would like to turn then to Joachim, and I think it would be great to hear from you. You know, we've been seeing in the past year or so farmers protesting for fair remuneration. President von der Leyen mentioned before in her video speech how Europe is delivering on it, and I wanted to hear from you. Let's say, what are perhaps some lessons learned from that?
Yes, we heard today Ms. von der Leyen and the new commissioner, and we hope they spoke very well. And what we farmers all are asking us is, will we be able to pass down to the market the costs of investments in animal health, in environment protection, will the market give us back these investments, because there are great investments, and this will be a big challenge for our future. Then only so our youth will invest in agriculture. Otherwise, the investments will not be there.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Joachim. And Cédric, from your side, I believe you also have some little goodie or graphic that you would like to show us.
Oui, pour compléter les propos.
Yes, to add to what's been said, it's a shame the Commissioner's not here anymore. We need a bit more of a global and holistic policy, and at the moment the agricultural policy is too much broken down into silos. You have the CAP, then you have carbon policy, then you have phyto products, etc. But these different areas can contradict one another. On Monday I had a meeting on the definition of the reduction of phyto products. That's something that has been worked on in one area. Then on Tuesday you might have a meeting on carbon, and then you're being told different things. You're being told it's not a good idea to work the soil without phyto products. So there needs to be coherence between these different areas within the European context. I had a question. There was a question about food security and living conditions, but also nutrition. I think nutrition has to be a subject that's on the national curriculum, because a lot of people rely on ready meals, things with a lot of fats and so on, whereas we actually need to educate people about cooking, about nutrition, and fast food is partly responsible for that. If you have a €100 note, here's a €100 note, I have it here. If you go to the supermarket and you go and spend €100, you can see a little red mark on my note here, and that is what you would actually spend on healthy food. And there's only €7 being spent on every €100 today on healthy products. That's based on a study we carried out in France.
Now I'm very mindful of the timing, and we'll have to move to the second one of our parallel sessions, but maybe if we could summarize in just one sentence, what's perhaps the key recommendation that you would have for policymakers for the future, or how we can better cooperate towards our common goal, which we'll also then we'll discuss in detail in the second panel. Maybe we can do another round from Mirle back to Cédric.
So for us as a Belgian Price Observatory, it's really important to bring this transparency to the entire food supply chain, and to be an objective and neutral partner, to work closely together with all partners of the food supply chain.
Mm. Thank you. Nathalie?
We talk a lot about over-regulation in these times, so I can just share that I think having one body, which is like competition authority and enforces against UTP practices, is like a one-stop shop for companies, and I think it's a well-placed way to organize enforcement, and I think it's actually helpful to have both in one institution. And of course, we also welcome the proposals by the Commission, especially regarding strengthening the UTP enforcement today.
Thank you. Émilie?
Je pense que c'est...
I think this interaction between the three stakeholders, as I said in my introduction, the legislator, the sector, and then companies themselves, I don't think that should be underestimated, because the sector has a great deal of potential. There are always agreements that can be concluded which benefit everybody. And I'd like to pick up on what Cédric said. Seeing the food chain as a chain, let's not think about different silos, but see all the links in the chain, so that consumers can find solutions that are realistic, with the aim of making this a chain.
Said what I wanted to say, that I will try to end it like I think we need to understand each other in the chain, which is one and cannot be separated, but we might have to realize more than before that we are dependent on each other, in a way. Like none of the, should we say, 3 key players or 4 with the authorities. Yeah, sorry. None of us can put food on the table without the other 3. So this is what we should keep in mind, to have good solutions and compromises for all 4 of the key silos. And that we should, sorry again, yeah, we shouldn't keep silos if possible.
Thank you, Attila. Joachim?
Well, I can underline what was said. We are in the same food chain, and if we continue to sustain sustainability, it's clear that the sustainability has one pillar, that's the economic part, and the economic part must be for all members of this food chain, and they must be able to survive. So the agricultures too. So I hope we all cope together to make the future reliable.
Thank you. Et Cédric.
Moi, j'aurais un mot, c'est confiance.
My keyword is trust between ourselves, promoting innovation and aiming for regulation of the future, which is less top-down and more bottom-up. I have cooperatives next to me here who have been part of a European Innovation Strategy Partnership, and I think that there are good tools as part of this that the European Union has today. So innovation has to come from the ground upwards, bottom-up. That's crucial for us.
I love the fact that we're finishing this first panel with the word trust. I will not be the one summarizing the main points of this discussion. I would like to invite in our stage to share some reflections from our discussion that we just had. The Acting Director for Markets and Cases for Basic Industries, Manufacturing and Agriculture at the Commission's Directorate General for Competition, Michele Piergiovanni. Welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Besides my voice, which is due to the season, and sorry about that. Look, I'll try to summarize in 5 minutes such a rich discussion, which is not an easy topic. I'll try to do it nonetheless, not before having thanked Ms. Bonnet for her great scene setter, which got us starting in today's discussion. I'll try to summarize it by level of the value chain, if you want, and see whether trying to make justice to the intervention that we made so far. What we heard, I think, is a clear call from farmer side, from Mr. Benoit and Mr. Reinalter, to make sure that if farmers are called to invest in new sustainable products, in decarbonizing, they actually get a fair revenue for that. And I think that's something which is necessary for them to be able to incentivize to invest and to actually help push towards the transition. And also the importance that there is trust in the future for farmers, and we avoid that new generations move away from the sector, as also Mr. Reinater clearly mentioned, given the challenge that especially mountain agriculture is facing these days. So I think that's really an important takeaway, to make sure that there is a quid pro quo for farmers who actually are called to invest in new green and ways to produce. Moving to food production, I think Mr. Walsh clearly tried to dismantle, to demit a bit this idea that all food processing companies are big companies. It's a very heterogeneous sector with small players, big ones, who also somehow have suffered during the last couple of years the crisis and the high input costs, and they also need to adjust themselves and be more efficient down the road to be able to play with the other actors in the value chain to make sure that in the end everybody gets a fair share of the value that is created. The call from all players, including Ms. Bourgoin from retailers, has been to work together, to cooperate, to trust each other, but also I like the point made to educate consumers. We want consumers actually to start choosing more quality over price and spend a bit more in products which actually are also for higher value and higher margin for the chain. They have to be educated and explain why it is important for them that they do so. And that's also a very important thing to work. Then we get to the public authorities, both Ms. Harsdorf and Ms. Klessens. I think the importance of sound database policymaking, not rushing to conclusions, not rushing to pass a regulation just for the sake of it, but doing so after careful collection and data gathering is really, really important, as well as important that on the competition side, enforcement continues to tackle those practices which are anti-competitive or unfair. As far as we are concerned, I think we are also ready to cooperate and work together with everyone along the value chain to make sure that everybody gets a fair deal from farmers to consumers. And I look forward to the next panel to hear how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Michele Piergiovanni for summarizing so nicely the first one of the discussions that we had here on stage. If I can ask for a big round of applause also for the speakers that have joined us in this excellent conversation. I'll invite you all now to take a seat back. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and reflections in this first one of the panel discussions in which we have looked on the past 2 years and on the current challenges. We also started talking a little bit about the way forward, but this is really what we're going to be talking in depth in this second one of our discussions in this afternoon. So let's get to know the speakers that will join us for this second panel discussion. I'll be calling them one by one, and they can sit here with me on stage. I would like to start by introducing the president at Cogeka, Lennart Nilsson. Welcome. Lennart, you could sit here. Also with us is the spokesperson for the Confédération Paysanne and European Coordination of Via Campesina, Laurence Marandola. There you are. Thanks a lot, Laurence. If you can join me over here. We also have with us the Vice President at Barilla, Leonardo Mirone. Welcome. Leonardo can join us over here. Also with us is the Secretary General at the Spanish Retailers and Wholesalers Association for Fast-Moving Consumer Goods, Felipe Medina Martin. Welcome. Over here. And last but definitely not the least, we have with us the Director General of the European Consumer Organization BOOK, Agustin Reina. Welcome. So Agustin can join me over here. So I've already introduced our speakers, but before we hear from them, let's hear some voices from farmers across Europe. We have a few video messages prepared for you that will serve us to set the scene for this second discussion that we are going to have. So I would say on with the first 3 videos that we have.
Jean-François Bléchet, je suis agriculteur.
I'm Jean-François Bléchet, a farmer with a big farm in France, 100 kilometers south of Paris, and I'm mainly growing spring barley, which is used for brewing, wheat and sugar beets. I work via 2 cooperatives to sell my products. I've got 340 hectares, which are sent to Agro-Pithiviers, which is 10 kilometers away from my farm. And I also work through a larger cooperative, which is one of the biggest sugar co-ops in France. The advantage of marketing my products through cooperatives is that they give me access to markets I wouldn't be able to access on my own. And they also allow me to add value to my produce, because I entrust them with the task of finding not only markets, but also the best possible remuneration for the produce I offer them. To start farming, I think you need to have a good knowledge of the markets, because we don't actually produce for the sake of producing, we produce to supply markets. So you need to have a good knowledge of the markets and the remuneration offered by these markets to decide what crops you're going to grow on your farm.
Hello, my name is Luc van Orbeek, and I am working for the Belgian cooperatives in the fruit and vegetable sector, and it's in the north part of our country in Flanders. We are selling our products in producers' organizations. There we are very typical. 80% of our fruit and vegetables is sold throughout producers' organizations. The system we are working with has great advantages. We are concentrating the supply side by organizing ourselves in producers' organizations, and that way we are strengthening the position of our producers, of our farmers. We can concentrate our supply and give an answer to that challenge. I do think the farmers are fairly remunerated in this system, but we have to face that we have a volatile market. Sometimes prices are reasonably high, other times they are low. And therefore, we are working on a transparent system that contributes to a fair price. Everybody can see, everybody can follow, and this is our contribution to a fair price system. The top challenge will be to combine the economic reality with their passion. And if the passion wins, they will have really a big opportunity in our sector.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Léo Bayen.
I'm Léo Bayen, 25 years old. I've been here since a year and a half on a Pidio Comté farm in the Jura Mountains in eastern France. Here we have two partners with 65 dairy cows, which produce 500,000 litres of milk, which are delivered to the dairy cooperative, which turns our milk into Comté cheese. We have a 3-pillar system. The first pillar is the producer pillar. The second is the dairy cooperative, where the milk is transformed into cheese, and then the refiner part, which manages the aging of the Comté and its commercialization. Within this circle, there will be a direct economic return, closely linked to quality. As a result, today, the 3 large links in the Comté chain have good economic results that everyone is satisfied with. We also comply with PDO specifications to promote agriculture, which allows us to get ahead and build the agriculture of tomorrow. So it's useful from a moral point of view to meet society's expectations as well. My message is get involved in a sector like ours, because we are very much independent and our diversity is unrivaled.
All right, so we just heard from... All right, so we just heard from Jean-François and Léo from France and Luc from Belgium. We just heard their testimonies. We would also like to hear from you throughout this discussion, because we're going to have Slido open for your questions as well. We're, as always, a little bit tight on time, but we'll try to get as many questions as possible. So, as you know, join on slido.com and use the hashtag Agri-food Days, and we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. Now, on to our panelists. We've already heard these first testimonies, and the topic of this discussion is towards a fair food chain. So I would like to start by asking the president of COGECA, the cooperatives, Lennart Nilsson, what does it take to get to a fair food chain?
Thank you very much. It's a good question. Maybe we got some views from the videos here. They were very good. But first I want also to present myself a little bit more, because beside being president in COGECA, the organization for the agri-cooperatives in Europe, representing over 20,000 cooperatives, from very small cooperatives, local cooperatives, to very big cooperatives that works multinational, like Arla Foods in Sweden, Denmark, and Northern Europe. So we have a very big difference in that. But first and most, I'm a farmer also. I'm a farmer on the Swedish west coast, where I farm together with 2 brothers-in-law. We have a mixed farm with arable crops, beef farming. We do some contracting, and like most farmers also in Sweden, we have some forestry. So that's a little bit my background. I'm also active in a cooperative at home in Sweden, a small local cooperative that's part of the bigger Lantmännen grain and supply cooperative. And that's makes me to have experience both from the small, local, very close work in our small cooperative, but also the strength of the big cooperative, which is maybe one of the solution for being stronger in the food value chain. Because if I think a little bit about, is the food chain fair? I must say, if I say a simple answer, it's no. And the reason are a lot. It has, in my view, to see that we farmers don't get the fair share of the price, and it's a very unbalanced distribution of costs and benefits along the food supply chain. I see if I do some added value, it's not only that there it's multiplied several times in the value chain, and that makes competition very hard. There is also different, the food chain is very different in Europe. For example, in my own country, there is a few very strong retailer chains that dominate the market. That's also the main place where people buy their goods. Other countries are dominated by discount retailers, originating often from different other countries than their own. Other markets have still preserved a little bit the more local market where farmers can sell direct. So there's a big difference. But in many cases, it's the bargaining power of the farmer is less. The balance in the chain is different. And we even see that the big Arla, who is a big company, has also tough. One time you could see that on one level they want, the retailers, they want to support the European farmers and so on. But then when you go to the purchase department, it's price, and it's price. So I will say that there are challenges. And of course, in my role, I will say that the cooperatives could help us a lot to get stronger on the market, to get better margin power. Because if we as farmers don't get a fair share of the pricing, that influence our competitiveness, that influence our income, but also our profitability to invest. And if we shall have a thriving farming sector where young people wants to come in the future, it's need to be competitive and profitable. So I think it's important that we get stronger commitments from the rest of the food chain to make the whole chain profitable. It's not just the biggest in the end that have the biggest share of the other value. And it's also important that we are not outmaneuvered of cheap imports. Like Mercosur has been a lot of discussion, but it's the cumulative effect of several things where we see a competitiveness that is very tough to meet on the market, especially on low price and discount markets. But I see there are some positive things in my own country. For example, the Federation of Swedish Farmers and Cooperatives, where I'm a board member, we are working together with some of the retailers to promote the farmer and the farming sector. It's not in any way a price or market, but it's we have common goal of, and that's about the values that European and Swedish production stands for. So I think that's important. Another thing
very briefly, please.
Yeah, very short. The farmer organizations, all of the farmer organizations stand behind that we get revisions of the CMO and the UTP directive. We have made a common letter from SESHA, Copan, Kosheka, Campesina, and IFOAM to get that. And we're very glad to hear today that we are, at least the work is started and there is a proposal that we will look serious into, because I think it's important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Lennart Nilsson. A lot on the table already, but I think there's a clear message from throughout the day of the importance that farmers get their fair share, also because of the need for a generational renewal, as we already discussed earlier in the morning. It's not that I want to throw the ball somewhere else or like throw the can, kick the can out of the streets, but indeed the trade side is going to be discussed in detail tomorrow. Today we could discuss in a bit more detail, let's say, the policy proposal side of things. Now I would like to hear from Laurence Marandola, who I believe also will give her speech in her mother tongue. So those of you who will need interpretation to French, then you have 2 seconds to put that headsets on. Allez-y. Merci.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you. Yes, I'm speaking on behalf of the European Coordination of Via Campesina. I am a farmer from the Pyrenees and a national speaker for my Farmers Association, and this is a crucial question for Via Campesina, better pay for agricultural workers. And I can tell you what we mustn't do, and yet that is exactly what the Commission did, which is to move closer to ratification of the free trade agreement between the EU and Mercosur. And it would be a real betrayal, a hammer blow to this community and to most of the French and European agricultural sector. I had to say that today because this is this feeling, and it's really quite tangible. This free trade agreement is completely incompatible with what we're talking about today, which is having fair remuneration for farmers. Why? Because this agreement will affect them directly. And we have examples of this because there are existing free trade agreements that the EU has signed. We can see that how it pushes agricultural prices down. And there are, of course, huge differences between Mercosur countries and ours. And there's also social deregulation for, as well as environmental problems, use of pesticides. The levels of protection are completely different between the two blocks. There are customs duties that are going to be lifted, and the change in competitiveness levels is going to push prices down. And that is what we want to avoid. And nothing will be able to really make up for the vast differences that we have here. So, indeed, we need to do the opposite in order to ensure that we have fair remuneration. We need food sovereignty. We need to be able to continue producing in Europe and produce everything. And now going back to Mercosur, the sectors that are going to be most hard hit: beef, chicken, honey, sugar. And these are sectors that we need to stay viable in Europe. And to do that, we need fair pay in the sector. We need prices that will allow farmers to keep producing, to keep providing jobs. And within our association, within Via Campesina, every farm, every farmer needs these prices for food sovereignty, yes, but it's absolutely crucial that we find a way to do a trade differently. That's what we need. The good news is that if we agree on that, and if we take action at European level, we can boost the tools that we have. So I talked about the UTPD, the directive. The UTP directive, and I'll just go into this very quickly, because there's also an overlap between this law and the 2018 law. In France, there was a choice made to say that if sectors volunteered to adopt certain measures, and it was only the dairy sector in France that did volunteer to do so. And then the other sectors didn't have any measures implemented. In fruit and veg section, they could negotiate or not on prices or not, whether they decided to. And that really affects my community in France. And so this idea of all of this being left up to the sectors is not compatible with fair food chain. Another point this law never allowed us to cover production costs, our production costs in farms, which of course surged as input costs rose. And there's a French profit observatory, and we have seen them finding again and again that we aren't able to cover our production costs. And there's also the problems of outsourcing elsewhere in Europe. So the UTP directive has unfortunately not worked well in France. And there are also specific proposals. Firstly, have a blacklist of unfair commercial practices. For example, one being selling at lower than production price. So we must ensure that we can pay our fees, our social security contributions, and only then can we really say that this is fair pay. And this is the crucial element here. I'll be very brief. The observatory, a new observatory for the European food chain has been set up, and that is absolutely crucial. We need to have an independent body that can monitor production costs, keep that data up to date, and ensure that we have better transparency for all of the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurence, for indeed outlining many of the measures that can potentially support farmers, and also those that won't support farmers. It's not, as mentioned, not the main scope of today's discussion, but indeed it's an important dimension to bring up. Now I'd like to move to the Vice President of Barilla, Leonardo Mirone, if there's some first reflections that you would like to share with us on what does it take to make a fair food chain for you.
Thanks, Anna, for the question. And today I want to bring a good example of something that is working in our company. I mean, it's not the final solution to everything, of course, but it's something that is working, so I want to explain to you what we are doing. We are very known for pasta. We are the biggest producer of pasta in the world, but we are also the first bakery in Europe. We have many bakery plants and brands across Europe. So soft wheat and flour is one of our key ingredients. And we produce biscuits, cakes, breads, a lot of products that needs different flours, so different wheat. So in 2018, we decided it was the time to speak with the whole supply chain to try to understand how to address the biggest challenges. And we are seeing two big challenges. One is the farmers, so how they can be competitive, how they can earn money, because they are the one farming the land. So we need farmers to earn enough money. If they don't earn money, they will not produce the wheat we need. And secondly is the soil. So a farmer without a good soil will never produce a good wheat at a reasonable cost. So we set up a table where farmers were represented by farmer organization. Then we have NGOs, we have the mills that are our partners, and then we have 2 universities working with us. And we defined all together a charter to have sustainable agriculture, mainly in Italy and in France. These are our 2 biggest areas where we source wheat. And we defined the best rules to have a sustainable wheat. I will not enter in all the details, but there are 3 rules that are very important. One is the favorable crop rotation. Here in the room, many people know what it is. So we study the best favorable crop rotation for each area. Then the best selection of seeds to produce our flour, so to seed the right seed, to have the right wheat for the right flour. And thirdly, we gave to all the farmers a decision support system for free to help them to take the right decision in the proper time. And as the soil is so relevant, we decide new rules for biodiversity. I mean, blocking 3% of the wheat area dedicated to biodiversity, so not cropped, but cropped with flowers and different biodiversity tools. And all the cropping, techniques were used to protect also biodiversity. So any harmful pesticide has been used, of course, because if you create a biodiversity area, then this can become a trap. All this system is working. Why? Because we make long-term contracts. So I think that one of the things we didn't speak today is how much is important the role of industry in making contracts with farmers on the short, medium, and long term. Because if the farmer knows how much to produce for us, and they know that we will buy for many years, they can plan whatever they have to do, because they don't have to do an investment in 1 year, and they didn't know what to do the following years. So the results are that we have decreased the cost of farmers by 10%, and they keep this in their pocket. We not ask for any discount, so they keep in the pocket. we pay all the extra costs they have to maintain the 3% of biodiversity area, and the costs are studied by University of Tuscia in Italy. So exactly in the different area, how much it costs to them, and we pay the difference. And thirdly, we reduce the greenhouse gas emission by at least 10%, then of course depends on the area, but on average by 10%. And now we have more than 2,000 football fields dedicated to biodiversity area, with an increase of 200% of the biodiversity in that areas. So it's just an example. It's not so small because these are 300,000 tons of wheat and, as I said, 2,000 football fields of biodiversity area. Increasing biodiversity, increasing the soil fertility, decreasing greenhouse gas emission, decreasing the use of fertilizer and all the chemicals, and increase the profit of farmers. So we think there are solutions. It's not the final solution, but there are solutions that can work.
Thank you very much, Leonardo, for showing us this first indeed example and good practice. Now, before I give the floor and continue with Felipe and Agustin, I still have a couple more video messages that we would like to show you. This time we're going to be hearing from Wolfgarius and Agnieszka. If I could please have the videos.
Is in het fruitbedrijf Wolfgarius.
Yes, my name is Yves Wolfgarius from the family company Wolfgarius. We grow apples and pears and we do everything in-house, including sales. So we work directly with customers and work with the Belgian retail group Colruyt and have a solid partnership that goes beyond the classic supplier-customer relationship. I think the greatest added value for us, selling directly to the customers, is actually this direct link that exists between us as producers and our buyers. As a result, as producers, we have better insight into the entire market, and that gives us a broad overview. But in addition, the customer also has better insight into our production. So seasonal dependence, for example. And we have the experience that this allows us to get a better price from the market. It's also a win-win situation for our buyer because all the intermediaries are no longer there. In our partnership with Colruyt, we do have a good level of mutual cooperation, which we see as very positive. And we also were able to use new technologies which the Colruyt group is researching. Thank you.
I have a...
It's Portuguese.
W Polsce, w województwie mazowieckim. Sprzedaję swoje warzywa przede wszystkim do kooperatywy Dobrze.
I sell my vegetables primarily in Warsaw at markets and also directly to a cooperative of consumers. And the most important challenge for me in such agricultural production and sale is to maintain a high diversity of my crops and also maintaining a high quality, which is extremely important to my consumers. Another big benefit for me is the close cooperation with consumers and the fact that we actually know each other, the fact that they also understand the challenges related to farming. Sometimes they do come to my farm and help me. So these are benefits that are really invaluable for me as a farmer.
All right, so we just heard from Yves and from Agnieszka, two examples of cooperations between farmers and retailers and farmers and consumers directly. So now I would like to continue with Felipe representing the Spanish retailers and wholesalers. What is your perspective in the potential of making our food chain a fair chain? What is the role, for instance, of retailers in doing that?
Thank you very much, Ana. I'm going to speak in Spanish, so let's change it. Muchas gracias por la.
Thank you for having invited me. So, I'd like to put a few ideas on the table. as I try to respond to that question about creating value in the chain and making that chain fairer, just to open the debate a little further. Firstly, I think we need to think closely about the communication around the agri-food sector in Europe. 85% of the news that we can read concerning agricultural production and the agri-food sector is negative. Many of them come from the sector itself. Many of those news stories also come from outside. So we need to find a common solution to combat that information, that fake news sometimes, that imperils the work of every actor in the food chain. And they include farmers, the industry, and those involved in distribution. So I think it's very important that there's leadership by public administration, above all food, in the area of food security. Arguments need to be put forward that are science-based and that strive to increase the trust consumers have in the food chain that we all depend on. Secondly, something that could help add value to the chain is promoting investment in production and marketing structures, above all focusing on origin, zones of production, rural areas. And the aim of that is to better improve the position of farmers in the chain and within these structures. That would make businesses more sustainable and more competitive and better adapted to the needs of consumers. Thirdly, another idea that could be useful is to promote stable supply contracts into the long term. And Leonardo touched on this already. These should be focused on a better orientation towards the market. When it comes to consuming and production, well, there's a symbiosis between the two. We need to look at consumer demand, and there's an obligation, of course, to cooperate throughout the chain and to ensure that we address the needs and demands of consumers. Innovation needs to be genuine. It needs to respond to the real needs of consumers and bring value to those consumers who ultimately depend on us, as I was saying. And a fourth and final aspect that's vital for me is that we need to have a rigorous, serious analysis on how the agri-food chain functions in Europe. We need to avoid using old slogans that are no longer relevant. This applies to work in Brussels and in member states. What we're seeing is that the historical modalities that are being used still throughout the chain don't work. Not all of them, but there's no... what we have in this sector is great competition. There's great choice for consumers. Wherever they live, they have great choice when it comes to shopping. So this oligopoly doesn't exist, and that's a false idea. Now, when it comes to margins in distribution, they're not excessive. I'm not going to repeat that point, but they've dropped even in this era of inflation. They've fallen. And what we need to do is, as I said, raise awareness and meet consumer needs. Generally, the market is functioning well. Millions of Europeans eat well every day, thanks to every actor involved in the food chain. When it comes to food distribution, who I represent, many work night and day. Many work during the night specifically while we're all asleep, so that the supermarkets are well stocked and that consumers who go there can have fresh, high quality products at competitive prices. The work of those people deserves respect, and this should be borne out in our communications. Also, we can't take a linear approach here. We have different products that behave differently. Different chains work differently. So there's not a one-size-fits-all solution in the three parts of the chain. In Spain, olive oil, for example, 4 years ago cost €4 in shops, and €3 went to the farmers. And when it went up, that's in the place of origin. And then when it was exported for €10, the farmers would receive up to €9. So we can't say that the distribution throughout the agri-food is something to be that can just be addressed in a linear fashion throughout all products. In Spain, we have around 600,000 farmers and 1.3 million people who work in the agri-food trade. That's to say, for every farmer, there are 2 people who work in the areas of distribution of food in Spain. So distribution is a vital element of the chain, and we need to focus on people and employees involved. And to conclude, the brands, the distribution brands themselves,
Marcas.
well, they're recognizable to consumers. They compete with one another and with manufacturing brands from elsewhere, and they strive to meet consumer needs. What's needed to address issues in that area isn't regulation, but just to guarantee conditions for competition for all operators. Finally, I just want to express full support for purchasing partnerships, that as a concept that can guarantee access for local farmers to the public at large. And through the directive on unfair trade practices, well, before that came along, that idea as a concept was really imperiled because there was an idea of banning their very existence overnight. So let's have a rigorous, sober analysis of how the agri-food chain functions and try to dispel those myths that have persisted through the years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Felipe, for sharing these reflections. And now I would like to turn to Agustín Reina, Director General of the European Consumer Organization. We have now the consumer's voice here at the EU Agri-food Days. What are some first thoughts that you can share with us about what consumers want of our food chain and how we make it fairer?
Super. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. Also have the consumer voice. We have the entire chain here, from the farmers till those consuming the products, and I think it's extremely important to have an informed debate, and that requires listening to all the different voices. And what is clear is that from all these discussions is that both the farmers and consumers are struggling. When I hear that consumers are willing to pay more for fair remuneration for farmers, for animal welfare, it's all true. Consumers are willing, but it's not that consumers then do not want to do it. Many times they simply cannot. We are still facing the consequences of the cost of living crisis. Prices still remain very high. Inflation went down, but prices remain high. So consumers are struggling at the end of the day. If you look at the affordability indexes across the member states, food prices are still an issue for many consumers. And this is something that needs to be taken into account. So farmers are not getting the remuneration that they deserve, and consumers are paying too much. Where the money goes? And I think that is where we need much more transparency. I like very much what Professor Bonnet said, and to link the question of affordability with nutritional poverty. And that is a reality. We see that unhealthy diets are predominant across the EU, and that is something that deserves also a lot of attention. Because at the end of the day, those that cannot afford the food in the first place, or the healthy options, let alone the sustainable option, are the ones that need it the most, because are the poor people that needs to that deserve to have a better and healthier diets. It was mentioned earlier about the role of education. We are, I think, the first ones to support that there should be more education about healthy diets. In every single school they should teach how to learn how to read a nutrient profile or the Nutri-Score. But the reality is that food choices are also framed by the same industry. Just go also to the supermarkets. I'm sorry, the food choices are being framed, and consumers are steered to certain habits that are not the ones also that we would like to see in a more sustainable and healthier future for consumers. So just to close on this, and we can continue discussion, but certainly when it comes to having a more informed debate about fair prices for consumers, for farmers, and everybody in the supply chain, we need more transparency on cost, prices, and margins in the food supply chain. That is extremely important, of course, the role of the observatories and of the competition authorities, but we cannot forget that for these authorities to be able to ask the right question, they need to have the powers to get information. And what is happening many times, or perhaps too often, is that they are not able to gather the necessary information for informed policy making. On fair trading conditions, I think we totally agree. We need to have a fair, level playing field. And it's not all about getting the cheapest food for consumers, but you get fair prices, a fair share. And a fair share doesn't mean a total share, but it means a fair share that is distributed across the supply chain. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Agustin. All right, so after this first round of statements, I have actually quite a bunch of follow-up questions, and I will try to combine my questions with those that we are getting from the audience. Let's get something out of the way. Already, I see that there are some messages and a question around the lack of gender balance in this discussion. I believe that overall, the lack of the gender balance in these events throughout these 3 weeks is good, but that's symptomatic of the wider gender imbalances in the sector. So hopefully this also sends a message to all of us to working together to bring more women into the sector and retain them. So yeah, just wanted to make a brief comment on that because I think it's a valid suggestion. Now, I wanted to come back indeed to a point that Agustin already pointed out, and that it referred back to Celine's presentation, which is the trade-offs that we are going to have to face when tackling this challenge, especially when we want the challenges between ensuring fair remuneration for farmers and avoiding nutritional inequalities. And I wondered if the panel had some thoughts on how to address that. There's no, of course, I imagine, magical solution, otherwise we wouldn't be discussing that. But I wanted to hear your thoughts on what are some potential options that we could put in place or how do we address then this potential trade-off? Maybe we can do another round from Leonard all the way back to Agustin.
It's maybe not in the beginning of the chain the problem starts, because whatever we produce, we do it to high quality standards. We quite often do it to the market demands, because what the market demands is normally what we do. If the market wants cheap and simple products, of course, then it's also possible. But the European way of having higher animal welfare standards, higher environmental and climate standards. So I don't think it starts here. It's further in the process, and maybe it's like, now I'm more on my personal ground. Someone said that we are buying more kitchen products than ever, but we cook less food at home. We gives the cooking over to others, and by then we also give over the decisions to others. So I think maybe I think it's more for the industry and for the, but it's also consumers today don't have the time always either. The speed of society is going up more and more, and as a result of that, but maybe then information and but I also have a big faith that consumers are and want to be well informed and are interested, but maybe not have the time every day.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Leonard. Before I give the floor to Laurence, I just wanted to also relate this point to one of the questions that we have from Slido, actually the most voted one, which says that if all EU social and sustainability-driven objectives are implemented, food prices will increase sharply. How do we tackle this in terms of food affordability and inequalities among lower income groups and rising polarization in society? So just also to frame it with wording that, that members of the audience have said. So Laurence?
Oui, alors plusieurs éléments de réponse.
So there are several strands to my response. Firstly, when you look at people who suffer from precarity, then we need, when it comes to food, then you need to include farmers. In France, 20% below the poverty line. So I don't have figures for Europe, but it really goes to the heart of the issue of pay and remuneration. That's the main issue. That's the question that needs to be responded to here.
De contradiction.
We can't have tension, contradiction when it comes to paying farmers properly for their work and stepping back with regard to consumers having access to high quality food. There's a tension between those two elements, and collectively, that's the question we have to answer when we're dealing with the essential issue of food sovereignty. The good news is that it can be done. I can give French examples. Of course, I know France the best. When our colleague from France spoke about the PDO Comté sector, it's a high-quality product, and it's relatively accessible, relatively as a sector. Now, that cheese for consumer isn't completely out of reach price-wise. So there are examples where we have specifications for the quality of production, for specifications for limiting the size of farms. There's a specification for the three-stage process, which shortens to some degree the chain between the producer and the consumer. So there are examples like that that can be made more widespread. Now, saying all the time that we need to produce cheaper, that's what we've heard. That's the discourse, that the food prices can go down then. Well, that's harmful for farmers because in some sectors, farmers will just disappear because there are issues around competitiveness, especially if we're in competition with cheap products from other parts of the world. But it will also harm the health of people, our society at large. So these are the tensions that need to be resolved. We have examples of how to do it. And we need to have food and agricultural policies focused on these areas when it comes to reducing these tensions.
As you said, Anna, it's not an easy solution, although we would not be here to discuss. For sure, I think that one of the solutions came this morning from the Commissioner, so to put food together with agri. It's something sometimes we lost in the past to work together to common solution. For sure, there are activity on sustainability, they are not only cost, but also efficiency. So I quote some before, so the right seeding, the planning the right crop rotation, whatever it is. So if we are able in next common agricultural policy that will come to work together, to put energy on the efficiency, then bring also sustainability. So reduction of greenhouse gases, better quality of the soils, increase of yields. This will leave also farmers to have more income, less cost, and to have a more sustainable supply chain. This can be done. We don't have to think sustainability only as a cost, because it's not only a cost. It's also efficiency of all the supply chain. Still, wastes are very high. So if we do medium and long-term contracts, if we plan together farmers with industry, there is the possibility to waste a lot less, to plan, and to make efficiency all along the supply chain.
Thank you. Felipe?
Sí. Gracias, Ana.
Thank you. There are many examples in this area. We don't have to look too far to see those examples and learn from them. They're European. As our colleague has said, there are examples. I could give examples from Spain of cooperation over the years between supermarket chains and agricultural cooperatives in order to invest together in improving the cooling installations, for example, to keep apples and pears fresh. And that helps give added value to local production of pears. To take that example, we've locally produced pears that throughout the season can be maximized. There's a few months of the year where local production isn't possible and imports need to take place. And what we see is that consumers don't like those imported pears as much as they like the locally produced pears that they can find in the supermarket the rest of the year. So we need to invest together to improve cooling structures, cooling installations. That's just a clear example of how we can cooperate in the agri-food chain in order to be more efficient, more profitable, and to respond to a specific need of consumers. And that's the key point of all this. There are other examples. Leonardo has spoken about Barilla, and I remember in Spain, similar examples with regard to industry buying seeds for an agricultural collective involved in the collection, subsequently, and then involved in the remuneration at fair levels after the yield was produced for the farmers. So guaranteeing 50% of the pay for farmers before the harvest. It was 50% was paid at the sowing stage, in fact, and this helps farmers deal with the seasonality of their work in a better way. They don't have to go elsewhere for funds. So the farmers were happy with that example, whereas previously they had to go to a bank and look for loans and wouldn't even be received in the bank sometimes. So that's a total paradigm change. Signing a contract into the long term that can absorb price volatility to a better degree, and it guarantees stability for prices. And that's very beneficial to farmers, of course. And we have these examples out there. We don't have to look too far away. But what it comes down to is choice, a choice made by producers. And as you've said, there's no silver bullet and there's no one-size-fits-all solution. But there are very clear success stories. Thank you.
Sure, and I think that is the question that we need to tackle, and we need to work to minimize to the maximum these trade-offs, because at the end of the day, everything boils down. I think the question was also indicated there: the race of polarization. People, get angry, when prices go up, continue going up, but their salaries, stay or even go lower because they get depreciated with inflation. And to do that, of course, we need to look at the whole supply chain, where the money goes. The money is there, but it's going somewhere. Where is it going? It is justified to have these price increases. And just to give one example, if we look at a recent investigation, but Follow the Money, the Dutch outlet, indicating that 8 brands manufacturers have seen booming profits in the last years. So we need to start looking at price formation, margins, and be able to have the data. Another element that is extremely important as well is sustainability, that I think was mentioned directly in the question, but is also part of the discussion, because we are asking from our farmers, a lot, and for very good reasons, because we need to preserve our ecosystem. We need to develop more sustainable food systems, but someone needs to pay for that. And that is a cost that needs to be shared in our society. It should not rely entirely on the farmers, nor on the consumers alone. It's the whole supply chain that needs to be responsible for it. So keep the answer short. We need to really work on minimizing inequalities throughout the chain.
I see. Yes, so we can get a round of reactions, starting with Leonard.
But you added a question after my intervention.
Yeah. Sorry, I just wanted to connect it to the audience's question, but indeed, yes, I would like you to react on that as well.
And also a little bit react on the last. In fact, we have done at home in Sweden, the Federation of Swedish Farmers, we have tried to put a value on the sustainability transition. And I was a little bit afraid when I saw it. If we talk, now we have the Swedish krona in Sweden, so I have to try. If the total revenue for farmers is about 8 billion euros in Sweden, the yearly cost for the farmers, if we shall, and then it's quite simple things: fossil fuel, fossil-free fertilizer, more improved soil health, a lot of those things that our friend from Barilla talks about. It's 2 billion euros a year. So it's quite a lot of money to that need. So of course we need to take that in steps. But if those 2 billion euros shall have just added percentage all the time, which we hear a lot of times, then it's a lot of money in the consumers. If we could dedicate the money for that in some way, I think it's doable. It's just, if you take a slice of bread, it's just a few euro cents on the bread leaf.
Any reactions? Right, because this question about sustainability and the sustainable transition, since you brought it up, there are a couple of questions on that. We have a full panel discussion tomorrow morning on sustainable competitiveness, which we invite you to tune in as well, in which we're going to be discussing, can we be competitive and sustainable at the same time? Maybe I'll take one or two more questions that we got from the audience. There is one about today's proposal that was announced just this morning by President von der Leyen on the targeted amendment to the Common Organization of Markets Regulation. The person who posed the question says that today's proposal further expands derogation from competition rules for social sustainability initiatives. And they ask, is there a risk that it could push prices up with no genuine social sustainability improvements? Anyone has any reactions to this question? I see Agustin, yes.
Yes. So, caveat, I have not read the proposal, so that means we need to go very carefully, and my colleagues working in food and the competition departments are going to look at this very, very closely, but we have some experience with the 210A, the previous amendments that have been introduced. We cannot forget that European competition law is very flexible, in the sense that we can cater for sustainability initiatives in the system that we already have. So when I hear that more exemptions, are added, I'm concerned, because at the end of the day, this works as a safety net, not only for consumers but for everyone involved. So from that point of view, I would like to raise some caution, and we should look at the system that we have and how it can already help, cooperations between farmers and horizontally, but also vertically, in order to develop genuine sustainability initiatives. Reducing the risk of greenwashing. Because what happens when you have all these greenwashing practices developing is that consumers lose confidence. And when they lose confidence on green claims, then that means that we can just simply stop with the transition because they are not be willing to engage further.
Thank you, Agustin, indeed, for this rapid-fire reaction to today's proposal. We will, I think, take our time tonight to go into it in detail. Any more reactions to this question? Laurence, yes.
Oui, alors moi non plus, j'ai pas vu.
Now, I haven't looked closely at the proposal either, but we need to be vigilant. If we're looking for reasons for entering into more competition, to put it that way, the consequence of that is weakening environmental regulations. So I think that can't be an option. It doesn't chime with consumer expectations. It doesn't help the water quality in Europe or the soil quality in Europe, for example. So when it comes to that competition and more homogeneous rules, we need to adopt common rules, intra-European rules, rather than having country-by-country derogations. It can't just be an exercise in hot air for farmers. It needs to respond to our needs. And we need to increase that competition among ourselves and also establish protection. And I'm using that word protection deliberately when it comes to imports coming into Europe of agricultural products that have been treated by pesticides that we don't use in Europe, and that can't be allowed. Those are the new protection rules that we need vitally in our trade.
Now, since we are nearing the end of the session, we actually have a question for the audience. So if you join back in Slido, you will have a question for you, a little word cloud, where we are going to be asking you, in one word, what makes the food chain fair for you? I'll give you a couple of seconds to connect and to react. Let me see, I see some of you are typing already. Let's get some first answers. Let me see. We need our time to think. It's a tough question indeed. Let's just see. What makes the food chain fair for you? In the meantime, then, maybe while the audience is also bringing their answers, could I maybe get a final statement, like one sentence that you want the audience to take with them when they leave the session? Maybe we can start in reverse order and have Agustin first.
Because the discussion at the end was focusing a lot on cost, I think sharing the costs equally across the supply chain. I think that is fundamental for a fair transition.
Thank you, Agustin. Felipe?
Yeah, for me, the most important idea is to work on collaboration among the food chain links and avoid fighting every day. That gives a very bad image of our work to consumers, and we need their confidence in the work that we do.
Thanks, Felipe. Leonardo?
I have to repeat the same. So collaboration is key. So we need to collaborate and to find solutions together. If we find solutions that are different from the different steps of the supply chain, this will never work.
Thanks, Leonardo. Laurence?
Oui, on peut pas laisser la
We can't leave responsibility on an individual level to producers alone, farmers alone, or consumers alone. That calls for strong policies to get away from that and to have a proper remuneration for farmers and high-quality food for everyone.
I see on slide that there's one with happy farmers. That's what you want us to take away. And to get happy farmers, we need to have a fair share of the food chain value. We need to be competitive. We need to have a fair income, but also profitability, so we can invest for the future. And I think, and I must say in my role also, and that's really from my heart, working through a cooperative helps us to have a much stronger part of the food value chain, and cooperatives need to be recognized for that.
Thank you very much, Leonard. Let's look at the answers. There is one word that stands out, which is transparency. We have been talking about it in detail, in the needs for transparency in the price formation, followed very closely by something that has also been mentioned consistently, which is cooperation, collaboration, equity. I see fairness, fair income, fair farmer profits. So, of course, yeah, making the food chain fair requires fairness. Yay. We see here market regulation, trust, sustainability, happy farmers, indeed. So yes, indeed, I think we have a lot of ideas and takeaways that we bring home after today's, I think, quite intense discussion. Once again, it's not going to be me summarizing it, because I wouldn't, I think, do justice to the quality of the discussion. This is why I'm delighted to bring our last speaker on stage that will be in charge of wrapping up the session. I'm delighted to be welcoming the Acting Deputy Director General and the Director for Markets at the Commission's Directorate General for Agriculture and Rural Development, Pierre Bascu. And I believe Laurence will have to leave us because she has a train to take. So if I can ask for a big round of applause for Laurence as well. Thank you very much. Now, Pierre Bascu, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much, Anna. I think, ladies and gentlemen, and dear speakers, as we come now to the conclusion, I think, of this panel, I would like to start, I think, by expressing, I think, my appreciation, I think, of the content, I think, to the panelists, I think, for the content of the discussion, which was very rich, but also very diverse, I think, about, I think, the way and I think our capacity to build a fair food chain. And I think, and the insight, I think, that you gave us, I think, this afternoon, do show that I think the issue of fairness and equity are really central, I think, for the future functioning of our food system. I would like also to start by, before going into, not a summary, but I think, some key insight that I think, and key takeaways that I took, I think, from the discussion. I would like to start by saying that I was quite impressed, I think, by the various videos, I think, which have been presented. I think these videos, I think, of farmers operating in very diverse, I think, sectors and very diverse situations, they do show, in fact, I think, the ingenuity and I think the commitment of the farming sector, I think, both in the production but also in the processing and marketing part, I think, of the chain to really, develop and contribute, I think, to the viability of our food system. So in terms of key takeaways, and once again, I will not try to summarize, I think, this wide-ranging, discussion. In terms of key takeaways, I will start by saying that I think I've got three, in my view, I think, takeaways that stood up, I think, from this discussion. So first one, I think, relates to the need to empower farmers. And I think a recurring theme this afternoon, I think, was really, I think, the need to strengthen the position of our farmers in the value chain, because clearly, as it has been said, I think, by several of you, without, I think, a fair remuneration, we cannot expect our farmers, I think, to lead sustainability efforts and to invest in the long term for innovative solutions. And it is clear that fair opportunity, decent income, and secure livelihood, I think, for farmers, individually or in producer organization, is absolutely essential if you want to provide our farming community with long-term perspective and if we want to make the sector attractive, I think, for the younger generation. The second takeaway that I would like to mention is, and it has been repeated, I think, in this last round, I think, of discussion, is the need, I think, to increase, I think, the level of collaboration, I think, across the chain. Building a fair food chain requires really genuine collaboration between all the different actors, producers, processors, I think, retailers, and consumers. And I would like to mention here, I think, as an example, I think the video showing, Agnieszka, who knew, I think, all our consumers and who could directly relate and refer, I think, to these consumers who were willing to pay a higher price because I think they knew, I think, where the products were coming from and the quality of these products. I would like also to refer, I think, to what Leonardo, I think, told us about, I think, how, Barilla, makes effort in order to support farmers in their effort, I think, to enhance sustainability, I think, of agricultural production. And also I would like to refer to Felipe and I think on how Spanish supermarkets cooperate in order to support, I think, farmers and collective action for farmers. So clearly, I think this transparent agreement, value sharing, agreement, and also trust, in my view, and this is what came out, I think, of the panel as a foundation, I think, of a resilient, competitive, but also sustainable food supply chain. The third takeaway that I would like to mention relates, I think, to the authenticity in sustainability efforts. This is clear that I think greenwashing and, if I may say so, social washing has no place, I think, in the efforts. And I think it's Augustine, I think, who clearly mentioned that I think consumers need to know when they make, I think, a purchasing act, need to know that, I think, what they are doing has a real impact, I think, of the sustainability of the chain, be it, environmental sustainability, but also socio-economic sustainability. And what I would like to say, because in the last part, I think, of the discussion, there was some reference, I think, to the proposal from the Commission, which has been adopted this morning, proposal regarding, I think, the Common Market Organization regulation, but also the implementation of the UTP directive for, cross-border, enforcement. It is clear that I think this proposal are directly related, I think, to what we were discussing, strengthening, I think, the food chain and the position of the farmers in the food chain, but also, and in my view, this is something absolutely fundamental, is restoring and developing, I think, the trust between all these different actors. And this will be the last point I would like to say, is that we had very interesting discussion, very interesting, I think, topic of exchange, I think, between us. But I think we need to see how we can ensure that fairness is not only a topic of discussion and an aspiration for the long term, but I think that we do see result, I think, in this, implementation and ensuring, I think, the fairness in the food chain. And for this, I think I see two possible avenues. I think the first one, of course, I think is in the hand, I think, of the co-legislators, that we look now at our proposal for the CMO and the UTP directive. And I hope, I think, that this we will achieve, I think, the implementation, the validation and implementation of this proposal. The other avenue is to continue dialogue. I think this is absolutely fundamental. We need to continue to exchange, to share experience, I think, to share ideas in order to improve, I think, the functioning of the food chain and in particular, I think, of the fairness of the food chain. So I would like to conclude here once again, I think, to thank, I think, the panelists, I think, for this interesting discussion, to thank also the audience, I think, for all the questions that we're presenting today, and also, I think, for being here, still, I think, at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So I think this is a great sign, I think, of interest, I think, from all of you. And I hope that, I think, we can carry forward, I think, this momentum, which has been launched already for quite a few months, but I think that we need to complete and to continue in order to ensure, I think, a better functioning food supply chain. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot to Pierre Bascou for sharing your takeaways. I must admit that I'm very encouraged and very hopeful by this, I think, overall message of collaboration that we have seen throughout this afternoon and throughout the day today. So if I can ask once again for a big round of applause for our panelists for such an excellent discussion. Now, oh, sorry. No, I was just about to say that we are almost nearing the end of today, but I believe our Master of Ceremonies, Sasha, has some important announcements concerning the next part of today's event, the networking reception. So
lovely.
Take it away.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, before you leave your seats, so just while you're still in the room, we've obviously had a lot of questions and a lot of discussions on the really big topics so far today. Let me tell you about what we'll be concentrating on tomorrow, because tomorrow starts with the market outlook. So that will be presented first thing in the morning and an opportunity for you to actually access the outlook as well. Then we'll be looking at sustainable competitiveness in the face of economic and environmental challenges. Very popular panel, I know that one. And then moving into the afternoon, a panel which I know has already had a lot of questions. So we'll be talking about trade policy and food sovereignty tomorrow afternoon, which I know will be a very interesting panel, but also a panel I hope that will spark a lot of discussion and a lot of thoughts in the room. We'll also start to look at research and innovation tomorrow as well. So a very, very full day for you, starting tomorrow again at 9 o'clock. Now, just before you move, we're actually doing something rather special tonight. This year, we are looking back on 10 years of the Outlook conference and celebrating all that has been achieved. And we have a small celebration for you. Now, I'm very sorry if you're watching us online. You're not going to be able to enjoy quite in the same way that we are, but I hope if you can find a glass of something somewhere, you can raise it as well where you are online. Now, if you are here in this room, please stay sitting for a moment, because our cameras will follow Wolfgang out and we will enjoy the celebrations in here. Thank you. stage, I don't know whether I should wait to see if he'll eat it or not. I think oh, maybe. Let's see. Well, isn't. Ladies and gentlemen, cake and something that looks quite sparkly is served outside for you. So we will see you back in the room tomorrow at 9. We'll see you online as well tomorrow at 9. Enjoy your networking evening. Let the conversations continue. Thank you.